Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, we talk about 4 different types of freedom: financial, time, location, and health freedom. And today we have a special guest, Ashton. He's going to talk to us all about growing and scaling your company and your business. And he's an expert in the fitness equipment, buying and selling of equipment. The principles we discuss here, you can apply to any aspect. So I'll let him introduce himself. So Ashton, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I know, I really love entrepreneurs because there's so many lessons, and they're kind of core principles, and you can apply them to anything. You can apply them to the technology, software, product, service. So tell us how you got started, what your company is about, and we'll get into the meat of the show.
Yeah. So we started this business as a side hobby. It was me and my wife, and we were locked down during the pandemic, as a lot of other people were. Right about March of 2020, we were looking at getting a home gym together because all of the gyms that we wanted to get gym memberships at were closed. And so we bought our first, it's called a squat rack. So it's basically a 4-pose rack with some safety rods to keep you from killing yourself during a lift. And it was lime green. I'll never forget it. It was a Titan T3 rack, and it was glorious. And I think I sold that for almost double what I had paid for it when I was looking to then upgrade to another rack, because I liked the rack, but it just didn't feel sturdy enough to me. And right about the time, everything in the gym equipment and fitness equipment space was exploding. So I went right back around to sell it, not even a few weeks later, and it had doubled in value. So at that point, I figured maybe there's a market for this stuff, even if it's temporary. And so I started flipping items, refurbishing stuff and flipping, finding bulk lots of things to sell. And I had fun with that for a few months. And then at some point, I realized I've got recurring customers now, people that, it was, shed in our backyard kind of situation. And there was a lot of people showing up at the house. And at that point, I looked at my wife and I went, maybe this could become something bigger. And right about that exact same time, providentially, our business was, the company I was working for was offering us a package to leave the company, basically. And so I was like, I'm not sure about that. They gave us about 6 or 8 months to think it over. And so I talked to my wife about that. We're like, my wife was and has been from the get-go just full bore, let's do it, quit your job now. How about yesterday? How about the day before that? Because I was miserable. And I was like, no, let's test this out. Let's be careful. Let's do some case studies and things. So we did that for 6 months, and the business just took off. I mean, it just absolutely murdered. And in July, we went to an LLC. In November, I quit my job, took the package, and we've just been riding this wave ever since. So Freedom Fitness Equipment is the name of the company. We buy and sell fitness equipment. Mainly, I've got a big heart for used commercial grade equipment because it's just so much better and better built. I've seen Nordic Track treadmills crack in half under, normal loads. So we don't sell that stuff. But it's been fun because unlike my other job, which was in financial services, this is actually rewarding, and I can see the direct impact to the consumer. Health and fitness is a lifestyle. Yeah,
that's a really interesting story. I remember, I remember just during the pandemic, people, because all the gyms were closed, and then people were just on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, wanting to buy like gym equipment so they could work out, which is interesting. And then I even saw like 24-hour fitness. I'm not sure if that franchise is there, but they would close down and they would sell all their equipment for really discounted prices. So
oh wow,
yeah, that was but what's interesting is, you talk about, this is interesting, is really, how did you grow a business, from your backyard to a nationwide company in less than a year?
Yeah, so that was pretty difficult to scale, but for most entrepreneurs, the shipping and freight is the most difficult part of the puzzle, right? Because you go from hyper local if you can do it right and you can scale, you go from hyper local to nationwide with millions of eyeballs. And so I figured out early on that I need to find a way to be able to ship everywhere in the United States. So at the time we had some sort of a basic website. I think I was on a platform called I think I was on Wix initially, and then BigCommerce. And those platforms didn't really have great options for integrating anything except for USPS and UPS shipping, which is fine for smaller stuff. But we have, fitness equipment. Some of that stuff is huge. Treadmill is, gigantic. And so I need to figure out a way to grow the business in a way and scale the business in a way to where not only would I look big and have enough inventory for customers all over the United States, but I'd also be de-risking myself. So I'd be, once COVID stopped, I wouldn't have to be just reliant on the Charlotte metro area for business. And so early on, I figured out there was a couple of websites that I used to scale that. So on our physical website for Freedom Fitness Equipment, we would put call for shipping quotes. And while that wasn't automated, it allowed us to pick up the phone or call somebody or talk to somebody that was in California and say, hey, we can get something out there. And what we used were two sites, uship.com and shiply.com. And they're basically shipper aggregators, people that got trucks, trailers, box trucks all over the US, tractor trailers, and they just make routes and they'll add your item to their route, usually at a greatly discounted cost to you. And they'll drive it out to California if you want for the right price. So that's how we did most of our business early on before we had automated a lot of that shipping, and how we got nationwide pretty quickly, because within the first, I'd say 6 months, I figured out there's these websites that aggregate rates. We can ship out to, heck, if I wanted to go to, I could even ship out to Canada if I wanted to. They had that capability. But we kept it within the lower 48. So I got business that most people weren't getting, particularly on eBay, from like California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, New York, New Jersey, instead of just this local stuff. So our sales got even better after that, because you couldn't find, if you thought my area was locked down hard, talk about New York and California, my goodness, it was a whole nother ballgame. And those guys were dying for good fitness equipment. So that's how we were able to scale early on, just in a very small way. I've always wanted to be a national brand and a nationally recognized brand. And now we get calls regularly from, I just was talking to a couple of guys from Tennessee. We've outfitted a gym in, where was it? East Ridge. We've got guys regularly calling us from Florida, New York, Maryland, Texas. And I had a few connections as of a few months ago that were still ordering from us in California. So now it's more automated, but in the first year, I was able to figure that out. And it's not easy. You've got a lot of back and forth with shippers and suppliers, but when our turnover was fairly low, we didn't have a lot of inventory, it was much more manageable. Now all that's automated, and we have freight, carriers and stuff, but that really put us on the map.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have, in addition to the ideas, what's interesting is that my question is, with the supply chain disruption with COVID, did you experience any limitations in supply, and ever where you basically, you had so much orders but you couldn't ship it because there's no product?
Yeah, so that's always been a struggle and always will be a struggle for guys like me. Particularly during the pandemic, inventory was insanely low, so you had to be really on top. For a reseller, you had to really be on top of finding good deals. So if you saw something on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, or you got a call from somebody, you better be offering them top dollar, and you better go be picking everything up that day. Normally, the guys that did that could be extremely successful. Also, if you were willing to sacrifice a little bit of margin, you were good to go. So basically pay more, make a little bit less. And yeah, so yes, it was tough. We had, I did a little bit of retail arbitrage. So I would see a deal on Walmart.com. They were deeply discounting some weight plates, and I would buy that, and I would just wait for the sale to go away, and we'd sell it at retail rate. Or, some of these other companies during the time had some good deals, but they were like flash sales. So we would buy up some of that inventory and then resell it locally. But now we actually have like legitimate wholesale, relationships with suppliers at really good rates where we don't need to buy, at 10% off retail and sell it for 10% margin. We can actually give people really good rates. And our inventory, we really don't have a problem with that now. But early on, it was definitely tough because if you weren't on it, and we weren't big, that was the other thing too. A lot of these big suppliers, like we've got several folks here locally who do the same thing I do, but at a totally different scale. So they've got the money to throw at an entire life fitness gym that's closing down. Whereas I'm a guy with a shed or like 2,000 square feet of warehouse space. I could not possibly fit all of that in there if I wanted to. It would fall over on me. So that was a little bit limiting for us early on was, do I have enough space for this? Because there were plenty of opportunities with gyms closing, but they were also getting snapped up by some of the bigger guys who had the funds to throw at it. And prices were still high, even for, resellers buying stuff. So it was challenging.
Yeah. And were most of your customers, they're just like like average people, they just want to build a home gym, or was it like they want to was it like fitness centers, they want to start a like outdoor? What was your customer like that?
Yeah. So we still got a decent base of home gym owners because that demographic has permanently shifted. So in the past, home gyms were a thing, but they weren't really that big. They were maybe 3%, I think, of 2-3% of total gym goers, and it shot up to like, oh gosh, probably 20 or 30% during the pandemic, and now it's down and probably equalizing out somewhere at, I don't know, 6 to 10% maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, that number has permanently increased for anybody listening. If you thought, home gyms weren't a thing, I mean, they're definitely a thing now, and more popular than ever. Rev Fitness, Titan, Rogue, Life Fitness, Precor, Hammer Strength, they all even these commercial brands came out with home gym lines almost overnight. PRX exploded, all these wall mount racks because you couldn't find space. And so we capitalized on that, and most of our customers were home gym owners. We didn't really have, particularly during the height of the pandemic, we really didn't have commercial gyms or personal training studios coming to us. We did have a couple people. One lady was really clever about how she did this. We did have a couple of personal trainers come in and buy stuff from us. There was one lady who, I'll never forget it. She bought a set of mobile like squat stands, a bar, and some plates, and she literally went to the park. Her clients would meet her at the park, and she would do workouts in the parking lot. It was amazing. So she was her own mobile exercise program.
Nice.
And it wasn't just resistance bands, which was really cool. So a lot of that innovation popped up during the pandemic, and so we serviced home gym owners, some personal trainers who were still doing one-on-ones. But really not much of the commercial gym space because that was just getting destroyed, and people were running out of business for that.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see the types of creativity and what people came up with, to cope with the restrictions and the lockdowns, and some of these business models will be the future Airbnbs or Ubers down the line. So that's going to be really interesting. Yeah. You also talked about, what I found interesting was you figured out a way to automate the whole the shipping process, like the quotes and all of that. Tell us, you don't have to give us detail, but just kind of general, what did that entail? That's
yeah. So the automation is really easy, actually. So because we're on a e-commerce platform that has a lot of apps that you can plug in, there's other platforms that do this, Shopify, WooCommerce. They all have plugins that you can you essentially download to your shop and then plug in via getting technical here, APIs. Basically, the app talks to your system. And what that does is, if somebody wants a squat rack, and the squat rack is 80 inches high, 45 inches wide, and 30 inches deep, those dimensions will automatically populate based on what I've put in to the customer's cart, so that when they go to check out and they put in their zip code, it'll calculate a freight rate based on their location and the dimensions and weight of the item. and I don't have to do anything once I plugged in those dimensions to the system and just automatically calculate. So it makes the customer's life easier because they can add whatever they want to the cart and see a bulk rate. And it makes my life easier because I don't have to continuously quote out custom every single time. And, it's hard with, if you get, a truckload full of stuff that somebody wants, obviously that's going to be custom because I'm not going to charge somebody $25,000 for freight as if it was being purchased piece by piece. But I found for the most part that those rates are pretty good. And even though it might take a little bit longer for some providers to reach people, because we try to keep the rates as low as possible, but sometimes that means sacrificing time of delivery. We found that the providers are actually really good for us, and people are generally pretty happy. Had a few exceptions like around the holidays where it got crazy, but the automation for us has been very simple. You just plug into the system and it spits out a rate at checkout, which is really nice.
Nice. That's interesting. What do you based on this what do you see the quote next big thing in the world of fitness and fitness equipment?
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk now about connected gyms and technology integrating with fitness equipment. There's a lot of people who are still stuck on this analog thinking where I'm just going to lift heavy things and it's iron and metal and clanging and banging. And that's fine. I mean, they're probably that will always be an element of the gym and fitness experience. But with the pandemic, you saw a lot of providers pop up like Peloton, like Nordic Track, like, Tempo, Tonal, that created smart gym equipment. And in some cases, like Tonal has got an all-in-one system that you can just run via a mirror on your screen, in your home. I think that's going to become more and more prevalent, and it's going to help people because if, for example, my neck of the woods, I love powerlifting. So a powerlifter who wants to have the perfect lifting pattern, so they want to be perfectly vertical, have their shins in a certain position with their legs, and there are apps that will help you to do that. And if they can ever integrate that technology with a squat rack, with a barbell, so that all you have to do is open your app, I see exactly what kind of mistakes I'm making, here's how to correct those mistakes, that'll be huge, both competitively as well as just casually, because you can lift more weight, have more fun, see some data. And I think the providers that step on that are going to do very well. The problem is cost. Currently, it's very expensive to do all of that, but I think over time, it's going to get more and more, it's going to get better and more cost effective. That's what I see long term. Short term, I've got some predictions, which I've put out on YouTube about, where I think the fitness market is going. I think it's going to get a lot tougher with the recession next year in the next 6 to 12 months to find used gym equipment, to find reasonably priced gym equipment, both new and used. And I think the used market is going to get destroyed with demand. So you're going to have a lot of people going there because they don't want to pay new retail rates, which is fine. But then you're not going to have a lot of inventory. I mean, you think it's tight now, I think it's going to get significantly tighter. I could be wrong, but I think as recession hits, it's going to get significantly worse. Yeah, tech in the long term, demand in the short term, and home gyms are here to stay. That's for darn sure. I think that market share is going to continue to steadily, slowly increase, particularly with this tech boom. It's going to really help people with their home.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I started picking up just equipment, and I didn't sell it, but I just used it for my own, and then slowly I didn't need to go to a gym, and I try to work out outdoors and kind of. Texas is harder, but I kind of train myself to endure the heat and the humidity. But this has been really interesting. How do people contact you, follow you? It's this is really entrepreneurial what you're doing. And
yeah.
So how can they do that?
Yeah. So if you're interested in learning, so our business model takes more of a consultative approach. So, if you're walking into our store, I'm not interested in selling you something that's a super high margin, high money maker for us. I'm completely interested in your training style, lifestyle, space constraints, that kind of thing. So you'll get the same attitude from me over the phone as you will in person, which is hey, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z, and then I'll just ask you a bunch of diagnostic questions about whether you actually need that. Because we've reached out to recently like fire departments, and a lot of those guys, yeah, they want squat racks, barbells, and weight plates, but those guys are pretty strong anyway. Usually they need more cardio because they're having a heart attack running down a long driveway. So when people call me, which I love for them too, you can go to freedomfitnessequipment.com and contact us. I try to consult with everybody. If anybody has any questions about fitness equipment or fitness in general, I'd love to help. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, TikTok. I mean, literally, you name it. We've got all sorts of long and short form video content. And then we've actually got right now, we've got a couple of writers writing for us that are attempting to help people out with different aspects of lifting and training and home gym life. So yeah, freedomfitnessequipment.com is probably going to be the best bet if you Google us, and then you can find us anywhere online through pretty much any of those social media channels. And feel free to call me. I put out my number on a couple of podcasts, so I don't have a problem with people calling me if they hear this podcast. My number is 980-216-4860. And that'll just route you straight to our business line, which is really just my personal cell.
Yeah, and for all the listeners and the audience out there, hopefully you had some key takeaways from Ashton's talk, and I certainly got a lot of interesting insights, and it's really interesting, and I love the story of growing and scaling. So all of Ashton's resources will be in the links and show notes. Be sure to check him out on YouTube and all of his channels, and thanks so much, and we look forward to hearing about your future success.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you.